Now, having just finished AC Valhalla a few days ago, I wanted to have a bit of a discussion regarding the game's story, but most importantly, the structure of the story and why it didn't particularly work as the developers intended it to. Also, this video won't contain spoilers for the story of AC Valhalla. Now, right off the bat, I would like to say that the story lacks a certain narrative focus. And by that I mean, what is side content and what isn't side content? Is it an AC story, or these stories are just basically Viking sagas, in a sense? There is a 20-hour Assassin's Creed story, a 50 to 60-hour Viking story, while also an Order of the Ancient story, and there are mythical dream sequences, which are all part of the quote-unquote main story of the game itself. As for the Assassin's Creed part of the story, this is something that I would consider to be the main plot of the story. And this is of course divided into different story arcs. This is an around 20-hour experience with gripping and intriguing characters, and the story and the characters themselves makes you wonder what happens next in the narrative. On top of that, the modern day is also well handled and integrated, and there are lots of connections to previous games and previous lore. Is this possibly the best balance of modern day and past since 83? I would like to say that yes, it's pretty close to that. But a big drawback of this 20-hour AC story in this 80-hour experience is that there is no summary of the story and the events that have happened so far, resulting in the player being rather disoriented. And bringing up just one example, one of the reasons The Witcher 3's narrative is more memorable than AC Valhalla's is the reason because it has these summary points during loading screens. And even though the story of The Witcher 3 is way longer than AC Valhalla's, it is still more memorable. And there is no real conclusion to the game whatsoever, to the AC story plot if you finish the game. Now, another aspect of that main story is the Viking story or the Viking sagas. These are around 50 to 60 hour Viking stories with story arcs involving usually you going to help this or that person. And the funny thing is about that, while you also have the 20-hour story, you have this 50 to 60 hour experience, which is around an 80-hour experience. And of course, the events and the writing and the characters are interesting in their own right in these Viking stories, and they rather focus on world building. Therefore, there is minimal or no connection to the main plot of the game whatsoever. And these are mostly considered to be filler content just to keep the player entertained, and I believe that these should have been made optional to begin with, not compulsory to complete in order to progress with the story. And again, there is no real conclusion at the end of these stories. And then moving on to the Order of the Ancients one. I never really understood on my playthrough that is this considered to be side content or not? Is this integral to the story or not? Because to be perfectly honest, it feels optional. And it cannot be considered side content because as the conclusion of the story is integral to the whole game's narrative's conclusion. And again, at this point, why not integrate this story arc into the Viking sagas if it is integral to the game's conclusion as a whole? And the last part is the mythical dream sequences. Now, the game tells you early on that these visions are important as far as Eivor's journey goes. But with an overwhelming catalog of missions and activities to do, it can sit in your backlog, and the game doesn't urge you to do these missions, although they are an integral part of the story of AC Valhalla. To basically sum it up, AC Valhalla has too many directions that it wants to take with its story, and it is to the detriment of the experience, as the story arcs, especially the ones concerning the AC side of the story and its lore, are rock solid, but are bogged down by the many less impactful ones. In this case, a less and more streamlined experience would have been so much more. But how do you feel about AC Valhalla's story? Do you agree with the points that I have made, or do you see things differently? Comment down below. And if you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And remember, stay positive.